Sure. Okay. I'm gonna, oh, sorry. Sorry. You ready? Okay. I'm gonna call this meeting to order. This is a workshop to review the rezoning consideration of certain parcels throughout the township. Tom, do you want to start, or what do you?
Yeah, it's the beat goes on. Right off the bat, our ordinance considerations that I had noticed, we had still have gotten some complaints about noise with dirt bikes and things like that, and I'm at a loss what to do with that. I know, as Ron said, we had a new one recently, and it just seems like our hands are tied to help people when they have a complaint. So I had asked Gretchen if there's anything more we can do about it to kind of shore that up where it makes enforcement a little bit more definite and not be as open and subjective. So I haven't, she hasn't had a chance to look at that yet, but I mean, eventually, if there's anything we can do, we have to do it.
Problem is, we don't have a decibel meter.
Yeah. It's hard to enforce noise stuff
Yep.
like that. That's the problem. Like, even a lot of times, even if they call the police, by the time they get there, it's gone. Right. So I'm
Well,
not really sure.
I think the more consistent ones where if a family gets a dirt bike and they keep riding around the neighborhood, just to, or kids, that young age, it's fun for them, and but I guess it becomes a nuisance to the rest of the neighbors because that's kind of it's not really sporadic. They might the complaint was they run from the time they get home from school just all night till dark, and it's just I don't know what to do about it. I'm at a loss. Well, that too, that's why I put in the drilling ordinance, that we still owe looking at that. It was written a long time ago, and things have changed. It seems like on the last few applications, Range has offered to do more things than even what the ordinance requires. Maybe those should become part of the ordinance, but it really does need updated and looked at.
Wait, I'm confused. So are we talking about noise ordinance or drilling?
Well, no, I just jumped to the drilling ordinance because that's also a factor.
Yeah.
In that. And again, they have some special rules that they can operate 24 hours a day. We had the complaints from for the noise ordinance about the transfer or the turnpike work. And again, it seems like we just got in a fight. It cost us money. If Gretchen did say that our ordinance seemed like it was a little bit vague on some of those hours whenever we approached them, and it seems like we had a settlement with them more rather than resolving it. A settlement with one particular project doesn't solve our issue with our noise ordinance, if there is one.
Right. I mean, drilling and the turnpike are separate issues from the
Right,
noise
right.
ordinance that we
But
were
the noise ordinance can address that, especially on, when we have operating hours and things like that.
I swear Gretchen wrote an updated, I'm sorry.
Say
I
it again.
can't hear you.
Wait.
Can you talk into your microphone? I can't hear you.
It's a temporary inconvenience
It's still.
or permanent improvement.
We had those problems with operating hours and things like that with that company. And like I said, we didn't resolve anything. We just got a settlement, and they honored them to a point. But, we still just, neighbors lived with that, and we were kind of helpless to say,
Right. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Darlene, but that was more than temporary. That turnpike
Yeah,
disturbance.
the turnpike was temporary and so was
but it was
drilling.
years, that was 3 years
That
in
was
the,
3
Yeah,
years.
well,
making.
but still, it's a temporary inconvenience. I
Right.
mean, because how long does it take to build a highway? It takes a while.
But the thing is, we had some ordinance in place about operating hours, and we still had a fight with them about that. And it seems like we had to go to court.
That was over Cherry Brook and places like that. Yeah, okay, but
The dumping. Anyways,
Well,
but
that-
those are separate from our noise
Right, but
ordinance.
that's my point, that I think we should address that now. I know the turnpike issue is behind us, but the next thing that comes along, are we going to have the same thing? Just say, we don't know quite how to enforce it other than to call the police, and then it becomes a lawsuit again.
So I know at one point Gretchen wrote an updated noise ordinance that we didn't do anything with. Do we just reach back out to her and say,
Yeah,
can you provide it to the board?
Yeah, I think Ron said she did a new one, but again, I don't know if we've ever even applied it.
We haven't, because nobody had any interest, but if we're interested, if a majority of the board's interested, I can make a note to have her resend it, we can recirculate it, and see if anybody has any changes, then we can move forward with it.
All right, just make sure that she knows it addresses that issue that came up the most recently, like by the
You mean the
Cherry Brook
dirt
area.
bikes?
Yes.
Okay, do you
That-
want
that
her
was
to
in there.
reach out to you? Because I don't know
No,
what that
no,
is.
I'm at a loss. I don't know. For years and years, we've had ongoing complaints about either dirt bikes or whatever, and I just don't know what to do with that. I'm
Okay.
hoping she can help us so that we at least, we don't have to tell somebody, sorry, our ordinance is vague.
Okay, I took note. If it'll get circulated to the board, and then if the board members have any changes, just,
All right, then on non-conforming, obviously, we've had an appeal of our own zoning hearing board on expansion of a non-conforming use and adding a new business to a non-conforming property. I understand it, and I think we all do, but either some members of the zoning hearing board don't quite grasp it, and sometimes Liz has troubles with that, responding to that. So maybe it's just our ordinance isn't clear, and I think it's all in the verbiage that it's.
you mean pre-existing non-conforming?
Yeah, the one
properties?
that's 1802, or Part 18. There's a continuation and an alteration of nonconforming uses for expansion and extension. Those are the two issues we face all the time, or Liz with our zoning board here faces all the time. And, I mean, we shouldn't have to fight about that. We have a thing in there for 15% of the space occupied, and obviously there was an expansion that they approved of over 30%, and I think they just didn't understand it. They were going by a footprint size, and, the ordinance, to me, it's clear that it's the heated space or the usable space. On a two-story, that footprint is doubled.
So you think that if we more clearly explain it in the,
Yes, you see, that's up there right now. Well, I guess you all have it in your, I don't know if you have it in front of your books, if you have your ordinance books open.
I didn't bring my
But
ordinance book.
Just on the expansion part, it talks about 15%, but obviously, there's an appeal on that already. So I just think we got to reword that. And I don't know if it's Dan that would help us.
Dan, do you want to do it, or do you want me to ask Gretchen?
On the non-conformity side, I'll be glad.
To make it just clear,
Yeah.
that it's there's no question on what it says.
Right. Right. Any ambiguities go into the zoning hearing board, and they're making decisions to really know what the board wants. That's
Well, I mean, all
you
right.
want to avoid going to the zoning hearing board as much as possible.
Right, same thing as an extension where.
Well, hold on, go back to expansion, but reality is, anybody can go before the zoning hearing board, and it's still, regardless of what our ordinance says, it's still up to interpretation by the zoning hearing board. So all we're trying to do is, if it goes farther than the zoning hearing board, make sure our ordinance is clear.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that the zoning hearing board doesn't get away with whatever it is.
Or we don't want to
Or-
fight, we don't want to fight
right.
our own zoning hearing board.
Right.
That's embarrassing, actually.
Right, I gotcha.
And even
Okay.
that last part under expansion, no new non-conforming uses added to the premises. That's a condition, that you can't add it, but for some reason, they interpret that adding an office to a warehouse wasn't adding a new non-conforming use.
Right. Gotcha. Okay. So Dan, you'll work on those and then circulate them to the board for consideration?
Okay, now, we've always had problems with, I guess on West End especially, the contractor's office, where the guy that was up there, I was at the zoning hearing board, and his words were, we're not storing equipment there, we're just parking it there. So I don't know if he thought he was just BSing us, or in his mind, parking it there isn't the same as storing it there. But he was going to keep it overnight. He had 4 excavators, 2 backhoes, 2 stake bed trucks, a dump truck, and all this other, whatever he said. But he says, I'm just keeping it there, I'm not storing it there. And our ordinance says, the original definition, I think. Just under definitions, then I ask you to bring up.
That's a contractor's yard. Right?
Right, but again, he said he's not a contractor. It's not a contractor's
So
yard.
that equipment, I'd say.
Well, I know, that's why I wrote something up just to clarify that storage or staging or occupying. Like I said, maybe he deep down believed that parking his equipment there isn't storing it there.
So you're simply just clarifying that it's not only the place of operation, but also the storage?
Well, I wrote a proposed definition. Dan, can you see that too?
I can read it.
I mean, yeah, okay.
It says contractor's
Listen
yard,
again.
any developed, undeveloped, or vacant land or parcel used as a place of operation and/or storage for a general contractor or tradesman, including storage, staging, parking of construction equipment, material, and/or company materials.
Vehicles.
Vehicles, I'm sorry. But make sure when you're saying that, you're saying like not limited to, because you don't want people to say, well, I'm doing something that is, slightly different than one of these specific things listed in here. So you want to somehow use the wording that including but not limited to. You see what I'm saying?
And I think that just makes it a little easier for our staff to not have to be in a disagreement with somebody who comes in, and then it becomes a matter of interpretation.
Right.
And then, in that case, if it has to be interpreted, then we have to interpret in favor of the applicant as opposed to what our perceived restriction is.
Right, understood.
So that was a good idea.
Where are you on your list, though? Are you skipping drilling ordinance? Are you going to?
Well, we already talked about that. I just know that it's been years since it was written up. Things have changed over the years, and it should be looked at again. I mean, we've had residents request that it be looked at. Nobody's demanding that it has to be this, or this. They're just saying, any ordinance that's impactful should be looked at every once in a while.
And there's nothing that would prevent us from working with Range to see the things that they've been willing to cooperate with us on in the past. For example, you brought up the noise thing.
Talking to Mike.
I am.
Can you hear it? Will it pick it up?
I think we're,
Yeah, there's nothing that would prevent us from sitting down and having like a round table discussion related to that.
Well, normally, that would be normal to sit down if we're thinking about revisiting an ordinance that impacts like a business like that. We did that with businesses in South Point whenever we were first coming up with a sign ordinance, because, all those buildings, they were new to us. Some were four-story buildings, some were just 130,000 square foot buildings. And that sign ordinance, we asked them, the SPOA and any other property owners to come and help us write that ordinance. Because when it first opened, every business that went up, they had to go in front of the zoning hearing board and get a variance because our sign ordinance didn't fit that type of development.
Right.
So I'm just saying with a drilling ordinance, if Range is willing to sit down, they're probably ideal to help us come up with things to adjust our ordinance.
Okay. And then accessory use structure or building.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, I did skip that. And we're aware that's come up a lot of times, that people think that Liz made a mistake in issuing a permit. We've had a neighbor up on Wilson Avenue say that a property owner built a garage that's like 5 times the size of their house. That's just really imposing view from their neighbors down below them. And we've had that issue with that property on Mawiney Road, that it looks like it's, I think Ron said it looks like it's for a future mother-in-law apartment.
It's terrible, yeah.
And I'm not against those, I'm just saying we don't address it at all. And the other thing is,
we're talking about the size of the accessory
Well,
structure can't be any, so much a percentage of that.
well, we have a chart up there, and Jack has it up right now. And yet it says, to me, maximum of 625 square feet. That's over a 24 by 24 foot garage for a single-family home on a half-acre lot. To me, that's not unreasonable to have a 2-car garage as a detached structure. 3- and 4-car garages on a half-acre lot, that just, it just seems like it's not being used just as an accessory structure. It's being used more of a primary use to have garage spaces for cars and working on cars and things like that. And that's the complaint we get.
Yeah.
So if we added that even onto that, into that chart where it would say whichever is less. I mean, if you have I'm making up a number, 1,000 square foot house, that'd be a 35% of 1,000, that's what, 34% or something? 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34% 34 I mean, that's what it would allow on a 1,000-square-foot house. And to me, that seems reasonable. I'm not disagreeing with the percentages on the charts. The bigger the lot you have, it's probably reasonable to,
I think it should be relative to the size of the structure.
And the
Yes.
location
Square
of,
footage of the structure.
and the location of it should matter. Like you brought up that garage on Maloney Road, they literally have it smack in the middle of their front yard.
yeah, that really interferes with the neighbors
Yeah.
up there. And that's the purpose of a front building setback, is to not, to interfere with the street view. You know,
Right.
when I look out my front porch, I shouldn't have to see something, blocking my whole, the view of the street. And
Right.
that's the purpose of it.
So we need to clarify that as well.
Yes, we have to do a lot of work on that one.
I
But-
think when you gotta go down here to B too. It says they're exempt from building permits and everything. I don't think that should be like that.
Well, sidewalks,
No, it says accessory structures exempt from building permits and setback requirements.
yeah, a sidewalk, driveway, a curb, a mailbox, lamppost, bird baths.
You have to read the list
Yeah, they're not
below
allowing
it.
any buildings in front of the building line. But the point is, I mean, we've got to work on that, but also that living in, if an accessory structure is normally supposed to be subordinate to the primary structure, the primary use on a property. I'm not against somebody having a mother-in-law apartment, but, I mean, that should be clarified. It shouldn't be someone just gets a building permit to build an accessory structure, and then it becomes an apartment in the back. Because that's more impactful to the neighbors on either side of it than if it's just a real accessory structure, like for your storage, for your lawnmower, or things like that. So to me, it's a completely kind of use, and we just don't address it. Like I said, I'm not against them having them back there. It's just it's not addressed.
How do you wanna address it?
As a separate area, if a building permit is requested for an accessory structure that will be have a live-in, habitat, what's that word? Habituated, or whatever that word is, then it should be a whole different process.
Okay. So you wanna do a separate process for an accessory structure with a living unit?
Yeah, I thought I wrote that on there.
No, you do, you have it there. Add a section pertaining to living in an accessory structure. And what would you want, greater setback on that? Would you want?
I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I've never done it. I'm not pretending to know what to do. I'm just saying that we don't address it. And, that
We
could
can,
be.
we can do some research, they have them, and so.
So
Yeah,
Dan,
model
you'll
ordinance or
handle
something
that
like
too? Okay.
And then the next one, though, I mean, even size restriction,
Before you go on, I want to get clarification on something else. Let's finish with your thought.
on, like an in-law apartment, I know there's a structure built up on Klinger Road. That one big house that has another house next to it. Obviously, it's a beautiful,
Davis, property on the corner of Klinger and Pat.
yes. Is it Davis?
That big one on the
Yeah,
hill.
yeah, on the right side looking.
Two houses.
All right, well, one's actually,
The house, and then there's a pool house, and there's another one.
but that's considered still accessory to the primary. And again, I'm not against it, I'm just saying, I don't know how big it is, and I know it's assessed high. But the point is, should it be based on the lot size also, or the house size? I mean, I guess an accessory structure shouldn't dominate the primary structure.
Sure.
And again, I don't know how to
Right, but would you suggest?
You're
that
saying that on Klinger, somebody has an accessory structure that dominates their primary structure?
What's his name?
I can't picture it. I can't
You
picture
don't want
it.
the garage to
house.
be bigger than the house.
Pretty big house.
Well,
They're
according to the
coming
chart,
from
it should be
South Point on the
35%.
right, right at the stop sign. Yeah. That's the sun on
If you
the
had a
other
really
side.
big lot.
I drive that road 5 times a day. I can't
Yeah.
picture it.
You got a really big lot. You know, your garage could be bigger than your house.
Right.
That's the only thing.
Middle of 7 acres.
Yeah, that's the only thing Darlene's right about. Like, what if I own 10 acres and I want a little farmhouse, but I want lots of machinery? Like, why would we limit? It should be based not only on the size of your house, but on the parcel of land.
But barns aren't considered accessory structures. If it's a farm, it's a barn, that's a.
But I don't own a farm. I just own 10 acres. I have a house on 10 acres. It's just a 3-bedroom house because it's me, my husband, and my daughter. But my husband really likes equipment and cars, and so he wants a big garage. Why would we care on 10 acres?
Wouldn't care on 10 acres. I guess the issue when it comes up in a plan. where there's neighbors on either side. So you're right, if it's related to the size of the lot, or you said original location.
Yeah,
Like the one on Millennium.
so those would have to be
What
factored.
I was
That's
an
ridiculous.
insult.
Huh?
That's an insult, and I thought the even violated the building permit that was issued.
Yeah, they did.
What I think I hear you saying is on smaller lots, like up to a half an acre, limit it more than you would on larger lots. Is that
Yes.
kind of what we're saying?
It needs to be a consideration of the lot size, the size of the existing house, and the location of it. Like, if it's in the middle of, if you're the only one in the middle of a big parcel of land, then go for it, do whatever
But the
you
charter
want.
tries, look at that, the charter tries to address that. It's saying if you had 5 acres or more, it can be 200% of this, so it can be double the size of the house.
The primary structure, yes.
So I mean, it tries to address it.
You're saying, Sandy, is if you build a nice little house,
Yeah,
and somebody wants to build a massive garage.
right. Like,
As long as they
I
have the
prefer to
property,
live,
why not?
I have a smaller house, I prefer to live in a smaller house, it's less to take care of, but some people want a big house. But like, what if I want a smaller house and a bigger garage, but I have the acres and I'm not impeding on my neighbors?
That's a unique, but generally zoning, that flies in the face of good zoning where the accessory structure should be subordinate to the primary structure. So you're saying if you have a small house and you build a big
Why
garage?
should it be?
Well, I'm just saying, that's the typical zoning. Am
It-
I right on that, Dan? That it
Well,
should
I
be
mean-
subordinate?
But you do in this township, you do have larger parcels of ground.
Right,
If you-
well-
If you lived in Scott Township, where most of the lots are a quarter acre, you wouldn't want it.
That's why we have to go a half an acre pretty
Well, I
soon
mean,
with
I
everything.
think your point's well taken, you're trying to limit it on the lower side, right? Up to a half an acre, it's allowed you 35%, maximum of 625 square feet, that's not huge, right? That's a two-car garage?
Well, it's like 25 by 25 almost.
But when you get into percentages, that's where it gets tricky, because if you have a smaller house, then and you can go 200%, you're still gonna have a smaller garage. If you have a larger house on 10 acres of land, there needs to be wiggle
Well,
room
that's what I
for
said,
larger
we gotta
parcels.
clarify that area where it says percentage or square footage.
Well, yeah, forget the percentage, like Cindy says, and like if you had up to a half an acre, max is 625, which is a double-car garage.
Yeah,
That doesn't seem unreasonable.
no.
Right.
No, Tony,
But
what do you
take
do
out
with
the
like-
percentage part of it and just go by square footages.
Or what do you do with like the other night with that here, and that guy's living in that garage, and he got all them other buildings? How do you break that down to how many square feet he's allowed to have?
Well, they're not even subordinate.
Plus, you got commercial businesses in there.
Right, that's a whole anomaly there, what he did, his house was taken. And he proposed them as farm buildings, because it used to be a farm, it used to be a horse farm, like he said. And when he got a building permit, he said it's for storage of hay. After the farm went away, then, now it became an apartment, one became a contractor's building. So that's enforcement there.
So what do you do whenever it goes away? And he does something different. So he's breaking the law because he's doing something different? Do
Yeah,
they
yeah.
just let the building sit empty?
Darlene, can
that's
you
what
talk
zoning
into
is
your
for.
microphone? I can't hear what she's saying.
That's what zoning is for, to
No, I can hear
protect the
you, I
neighbors.
can't hear
Hey,
her.
all right, if everybody was so perfect with each other, and you wouldn't even need zoning. Zoning is to protect you from me.
And you from me, like vice versa.
Well, right, so I'm saying, that's the only reason we need zoning. If I was so perfect with you and you were perfect with me, we wouldn't even need rules like that. But whenever he has a farm down there and he turns it into a contractor's yard, naturally the adjacent neighbors are gonna be upset about it.
Right.
So Darlene's asking, well, what's he supposed to do with it? Whatever you can do with it, but you can't put a contractor's yard just because that's the most lucrative for you. You got neighbors there.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Depending on how much property you have to, right?
It's not zoned, it's R1.
It's not, contractor's yard would not be parcel dependent,
No,
because
it
it's
wouldn't be
zoning dependent.
Residential,
Right,
contractor's yard.
right, that's a thing, it's our residential R1 property.
Right. Okay, moving on. So we did all of that, right?
Okay, yeah, we talked about clarifying that chart.
Yep.
And we also got to clarify the property up on West End, I think it was just a lean-to originally, and he claimed to the zoning hearing board it was a room, he just added 48 inch or 44 inches and a couple feet, and it became a two-story, 3,000 square foot addition or something like that?
Like he had more than 4 feet,
Well, yeah, he did.
pretty high.
Well, he added a whole second floor.
Yeah.
But I mean, he lied to the zoning hearing board, and they had no basis for, I guess, doubting him.
I don't think there was even a building there before, was there? He said there was.
The
think there was.
GPS, the GPS showed looks like a little shed back there.
Wasn't that for a trucking company? There's an office and everything back there?
No, they never had an office back there.
For the trucking company that was back there?
Having trucks doesn't mean you need an office back there. It was storage. But I'm saying they got the use they wanted. This is getting off track, but they got the use they wanted through the zoning hearing board. They wanted a warehouse. So they got a warehouse, and then it just morphed into a contractor's yard, an office space. But that's not what we're here for.
No, let's move on.
But we're on C, right?
Okay, the other thing is, I was going to say that if we're going to address live in an accessory structure, at least should be a conditional use, because then that we can apply conditions based on the size of the lots and the location and things like that. If it's like that house up on Klinger, she probably owns 40 acres around there. So what if she had a live-in, like Ron called it, a house next to her? Nobody would care. So I think that's the advantage of a conditional use. So I'm just saying, if we're going to, adjust accessory structures in those square footage on the charts and things like that, when we address mother-in-law apartments and things like that, they should be under a conditional use.
I think that's a good idea, because every situation is gonna be different. You know, it may impact where the location of it is, or,
Or no impact.
yeah, or a buffer, you need a buffer or a greater side yard or something.
Yeah, because usually,
But I think they should have to go through electrical inspection
sure.
and everything else.
But the other thing, usually they want to end up putting another driveway to the back. And our ordinance right now doesn't allow a driveway to go to the back, or there's a restriction 2 or something like that. I'm not sure, I'm not up on it anymore, but I'm just saying, if you have an apartment in the back, then they want to put a garage back there so the mother-in-law can keep a car in, it might be impactful in some neighborhoods, and it might not have any impact. So I think that's why, like Dan said, it's a good idea for conditional use.
Okay. These definitions, like, you don't want us to go through them tonight, do you?
Well, yeah, we can change it. These should be changed right off the bat. We're having problems with these today.
Well, but you just I didn't even have a chance to really read through. I think what we need to do is have everybody take these, make suggested changes, and come
Right.
back.
But, we still have to have another hearing. We actually, before we do anything, we still have to have a hearing on all this, too.
Right.
I'm just presenting it for the first time.
I'm just saying, though, like, there's no point in reading these aloud, because I need a
All
minute
right,
to think
okay.
through
I mean,
them.
everybody has
If
a
they
copy.
want a copy, they can
You're
see
right,
it,
you're
yeah.
right.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's nothing to hide from a copy perspective, but.
Right, but just so you know, for the private and the public improvements, there's a host of things that a developer in a plan can offer to do separate from us. He might put in a tot lot, which we don't require, but we don't care if he does that. But those are considered private improvements done at the option of the property owners. Right now, we only had 2 definitions, those that are private and those that are public, and it seemed like when you read them that they were all going to be turned over to the township. So this one, we don't care what they put in there, but sometimes our either developer's agreement or the approved PRD, we might require them to put in a tot area like we did up on the overlook. So that would become a required improvement, but a private one, because they're going to own and maintain it. In public improvements, though, we're not going to take over their storm system, but we require them because the state law requires stormwater management. So we force them to put in a stormwater pond, but it's not going to be a public improvement. It's going to be one that the developer or the owners association has to maintain in perpetuity. So that's why I broke up the difference between a private required and a public required. We didn't have that in there before.
Gotcha.
Not to get off subject, Dan. Is there an agreement that, like McConnell's or any of them, they are totally responsible for them ponds from here on in?
before any plan like that's approved, they have to do an HOA document, a homeowners association. Our solicitor reviews the homeowners association document, and that defines them taking care of all that stuff. We don't accept any of it either. I mean,
So
that's
then
it.
Peters got stuck with a bunch of them, and every year they put like 5 of them ponds out for bid to
Clean up,
go
yeah.
and clean them out. cut
McCandless is the same way. They got like 60 of them.
them. Wow.
Yeah.
And they have to maintain them.
Yeah.
See, and even if, it was said to us one time that, well, we're making them put them in, we should have to maintain them. We don't make a developer put a pond in, we just make him follow the state law that says you have to control your stormwater. How they do it, whether they put an underground tank or an ugly pond on the outside, we don't make them put those ponds in. And then if we ever agree to own them and maintain them, you know what they look like with weeds growing on them and things like that. Can you imagine our road guys going up there weed whacking around it, and then neighbors looking at it and saying, you know, your guys didn't do a good job. They left a lot of weeds over here in that corner where it's hard to get to, where it's steep. You know, if they want it to look nice, the homeowners association would pay a landscape company and they'll do as much work as they want on it. So I think we have a good system there. We maintain what's in our 50-foot right-of-way, like the inlets and the pipe under the road. But all the pipes that lead to the ponds and the pits and things like that, there is a body for perpetual maintenance on them that doesn't cost the taxpayers.
Most of these ponds are garden ponds now. They plant 100 trees in one of them ponds.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the important thing to recognize about ponds now, any of the new plans that have ponds, they have to have a post-construction stormwater management plan, which at the end of the day, before they do their notice of termination on their permit, they have to file that plan, it's recorded, and there's somebody put it responsible for the maintenance, not the township,
Right.
but their HOA or whoever it is. So that's the reason why towns got stuck with them like Peters is those things didn't exist back when. But
Yeah,
I,
they got a bunch of them.
so the format for making any of these changes would be putting an ordinance together, Tom, like we were doing from time to time, that would have all these changes.
Yeah, they're minor amendments, but we've got like a group of them. We get
We
done
put them in one document.
Right, and have one hearing and get them all done.
So Liz and Jack and I met, and we've been waiting until the board was ready to do this, but there are some other high-level things that the board might want to consider. If I can have 5 minutes, I'd go over some of the ones. So the one right off the bat, and Jack's faced with this right out of the gate, is a school in the SD district. So the SD is our South Point, and the question is, there's 2 universities there now. I'm not sure how they got there, but you cannot find in any of our definitions, if you look at SD, a school is not allowed in the SD district. You can have a daycare center, but you can't have a school. So I guess the question
I think what happened, though, is our zoning officer, way in the past, had talked with SPOA, and they didn't have a problem with it, so we can't figure out how in the past they got approved, but, I mean, if it was an oversight, we look at it now, is there any harm to it? Because someone else is applying now, or they're looking to put another school there. Is there any detriment to it? Is there?
Well, I mean, the difference between like the other ones are that they were office buildings that Waynesburg or Cal U occupied existing office space, because you actually consider it office. You know what I mean? It wasn't
But they came, there was a new building, it was built for them.
was it? Okay, I can't remember that.
Cal on South, and Bailey too.
Waynesburg, wasn't Waynesburg built
Yeah,
strictly for
yeah.
Waynesburg College up
Well,
there?
I don't know, they might not have owned it, some contractor built it for them or owned it and rented it to them, but it was from day one. Waynesburg went into a new building.
But I
Cal U went into Bailey too, was their first and only occupant so far.
But to Dan's point, were they built specifically for the school, or did the developer, the owner of the building, build it and then see who
No,
they
that's
could
what I'm
get as a
telling you,
rental?
Those both were done
For them.
right. Cal U went in that Bailey 2 building from day one and was built basically for them. Now, there's nothing special in there. It's like Dan said, it still looks like an office building inside. The classrooms are just like bigger office spaces.
But what we're proposed with now is a K through 8 school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called the Goddard School, was that?
They're calling it a classic academy. Right now, it's at the end of Klinger, that building, it's a Kosman building. As soon as you make a right to go up the hill, it's right on the left there. It's empty now, and now that there's no more tenants in there, they want to jump in and put a K through 8 in there.
Wasn't that Waynesburg?
No, that was a medical building.
But yeah, just,
There were a couple tenants in there.
Yeah, but I know there's medical offices in there too. Might not, maybe not all of them.
Oh,
But the
you
point
mean-
is, I mean, that's different than a college, but yet is that detrimental to the South Point or to the township?
I mean, I think there's a different, I don't know.
Isn't
I
that
don't
a
want to look
private
like I'm judging against the school, because I'm not, but it just depends. Like, do you want to keep it office buildings? Because if you're going to allow K-8 school in there, that's very different than an office building. But if you're going to allow, and like even the colleges, like they don't have a campus, so to speak. Like, it's just office buildings with classrooms that you're coming to learn. With the K-8 school, are they going to want to put a playground outside?
Gymnasium, proposed gymnasium.
Yeah, like, that's a totally different,
Yeah.
Well, Dan made a good point. So first off, we might as well run it by SPOA. SPOA says that they're not gonna allow it. They can be more strict in our ordinance. So if they said they're not gonna allow it, then we'll no use us wasting our time on it. But if they don't have an issue with it, then we have a right to come in and weigh in on it then. So let's not even worry about that,
But I
other
th-
than think about it.
But I think the bigger issue is that, isn't our zoning hearing board, they've been making use determinations?
Yes.
yes.
So does the board want them to do that? You could specifically call out in the UDO that under the zoning hearing board specs that they can't make use interpretations, because you guys decide the use, right? I mean, you
Right.
decide the zone.
Through the ordinance.
It's a good call.
I think anytime they made a use decision that was in error, I don't think it's a regular part of what they do.
Yeah, because typically what happens is if the board is in favor of a use that we don't have, you make a text change to the ordinance to allow it with certain conditions. I mean, that's the way most people approach it. There is no such thing as really a use variance, but people throw that around all the time.
Right.
So that was one of the issues. The other one was we were just updating the mobile home based upon what happened with the definition of a modular home or a mobile home. There's new types of homes, and we were going to try to get some definitions from Harold on those so we could get those updated in the ordinance. I just want to hit the major ones here. Fix the contractor's yard definition to include landscaping. A landscaper, what does anybody think about that? 'Cause that's always a question.
I think if he's selling to the public, shrubs and that's not a contractor's yard.
That's retail.
Yeah.
He's talking about pure,
A pure landscaping yard, like,
Oh,
the guy has up on 19, what's his name, Angelo?
Yeah, that's contractor's yard, I would say.
That's
but it's not, doesn't say that in the definition. Yeah, that's right. He does, up on 19, he doesn't sell anything to the public.
right, it's a heartache, it's a bellyache for North Strabane.
A&S does on 19.
That's the one, do they sell
They sell
wholesale or?
You can
wholesale,
wholesale, okay, all right.
yeah. I mean,
It's not a retail yard. I can just drive in there tomorrow at 9 o'clock and buy stuff off the,
I'm not sure, I know we can.
Just stone and walls.
So,
at least write it up that way.
yeah, the other one was adding single-family and multi-family to the C2 district as a use by right. That was another one that came up. You know, you have a commercial zone, but you can't do single-family in it. I mean, that's a board decision. I'm not suggesting one way or another, but most commercial districts will allow for residential in them.
Where that's considered down zoning, you can put residential and commercial, but you can't put commercial and residential. So there's nothing wrong with that kind of change to allow somebody that option to put a resident in a commercial zone.
Zone.
What if they're running a commercial business out of residential?
Well, then that's considered home occupancy or home business. We addressed that. Now, I don't know how big the business is, but they say hairdressers and barber shops and things like that where you can have a sign, or else an accountant who has one employee. It's addressed. I don't know if it needs work on it, but it is addressed on home businesses in a home
Okay, in a residential and a commercial zone, but you can't put a commercial zone in a residential area.
Right, that's a normal zoning.
Okay.
Just like you can put commercial and industrial, but you can't put industrial and commercial.
So the other one that comes up a lot, becomes problematic is site plans. We have site plans that expire after 1 year approval. The municipality's planning code says 5 years they're good for.
Then we need to change that. Because it
Yeah,
has to match the MPC.
That's a problem, and it makes more work on the board. You gotta keep coming in and explaining, why are we doing this again? Remember the TA Robinson ran out?
I mean, it has to match the MPC.
The other one on the grading permits are only good for 1 year. The question was, nothing gets done in a year. So do we want those updated every year? I don't have a problem with that. It's just another thing that the zoning office has to track.
What would you recommend if we?
Liz just thought maybe 2 years just to cut it in half, you know what I mean? That, like,
Try it, it can't hurt.
yeah, it's
I'm
not a
fine with that.
But
killer.
is it, so you're implying that it's from it's a year, once they start, they're all right, but it's a year to get started?
It takes a year to get started. I mean, by the time you get an approval, you get an approved grading permit. By the time you start and finish your grading, it could take 2 seasons. You could be caught up in a.
But I thought the 1 year was only if you don't start the project. That's the way I read it. You know what I'm saying? If I applied today, I have a year, that's good for a year, but if I started in 9 months, I can still do my project. I can't start it in 13
That
months.
actually, now that you say that, that's how I read it too.
It is, but
I'm not
Yeah, that's
saying
true.
it's right. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
it just makes, so we clarify that.
But somebody who starts, like Stranisha put in a fill site. I mean, they're, they could be there. Tom Robinson has a fill site. I mean, they take year after year after year, have to get those updated every year. It just makes more work on the zoning office, that's all.
So why don't we make them 2-year permits?
That was a suggestion
That's
from
what you
Liz.
said.
Yeah, that's fine. Do you have a problem with
Yeah,
that?
that's what we suggested, 2 years.
I think there were a bunch of little ones I'm not gonna bore you with, but I would probably, if we do this, Jack and I can work on this update for the board and get you a draft of something to look at.
That'd be great.
I think that's probably the best way to do it. Take the stuff that Tom has, get it in there, and then you're looking at really what the ordinance what the changes are from this to this. That's how you kinda have to do it.
And just to have the board members take time to look through this, the definitions, and give suggestions. Tom, who are we giving suggestions to? Dan, Dawn, you?
They can go to Dan.
Would you care?
Well, what I was gonna say is, yeah, I mean, if you wanna, Jack and I can work on doing an update to the board. You give us any of your thoughts, comments you have on any of this stuff.
Okay. And then on the map, moving on to the.
Well, wait, I got a couple
sir.
more on the third
Yeah.
page.
Do we have any ordinance on compaction?
On what?
Compaction,
Oh, compact.
in the grading ordinance, Ron?
Because I know like Mike Stewart's over there again, they got another slide over Mission Hills over there. Big one.
Mission Hills, you
Whatever
mean
that-
at Paul Scormese's development?
No, what's that over there? Where they had the great big
Oh,
slide?
Majestic Hills.
Majestic Hills.
Did they really? They did another slide?
They got a big one
Yeah,
there.
but they got, it's not,
Not as big as the first one.
no, it's not as big a deal, but, yeah. They also got $2 million to fix it too, to put in a retaining wall from the state.
Mike told me they're going back into the hillside.
They may be, I'm not sure on that one.
No, he can only do 40 feet at a time.
But under our grading ordinance, Ron, the answer is yes, we can require, I mean, we require geotechnical on every report. We require them to sign off, but that's a good point. I'll look at that section on grading, and if there's anything that needs updated to make that happen. But there's a whole section on compaction.
'Cause who got stuck holding the bag on that, Serbain?
Worcester Bay.
At the end of the day, what happened was that Ryan Holmes and North Strabane teamed together, bought out the lawsuits, and they are the ones that are acting on the lawsuits.
And you had to get some
What's that?
donated.
I mean, I'm involved, that goes without saying, but I mean, the people that, Joe DiNardo is the main culprit. I mean, he's the primary, and then he sued everybody else.
What about Alden, or Alton, whoever did that?
Yeah, Alden's involved, everybody that touched the job is involved.
Well, they're
That's
out
the
of
way
business,
lawsuits
right?
go. Unfortunately, you can be standing there doing nothing and you
You're gonna be included.
get sued.
You breathe the wrong way and you drive a car there, you're gonna be sued.
All right, PRDs, well, we should come up with a resolution on multiple accesses, or are we gonna leave it up in the air where if a developer says, hey, I don't have a place to put it, then we just let it go, or are we gonna, it's gonna be firm in the ordinance?
I am the minority in this because I
Multiple
absolutely
access?
despise the second
think-
exit to my neighborhood. All it does is make it a cut-through that people fly through, and it's gotten to the point where, like, on our neighborhood Facebook page, like, that's all people talk about, and, I mean, heck, Darlene, you drive through it, like, to get from 980 to King. So I don't think, my personal opinion on it is it needs to be a consideration from PRD to PRD, and we can't demand it, because if you were redoing my neighborhood again, I'd say cut the second access. It actually makes it unsafe, more unsafe than safer in my neighborhood.
I don't disagree, I wrote it up so we can,
People are complaining up McConnell's already, they're coming from Burnside and going through the plant.
Yep. It takes, like, I get the idea behind it, because if there is an emergency and the one exit is blocked, but in the 12, 13 years I've lived in that house, so there's never been an incident where I couldn't have gotten out of one way if I needed to.
Well,
And-
yeah, because you have the exit, you have
No,
access to-
because when I first started living there, it wasn't open.
Well,
So
but-
I've never been blocked, but I would say every single day, somebody is flying, every hour, every 5 minutes, somebody's flying through the neighborhood because they're trying to get from Profio to 980, and they don't live there, and they don't pay attention to the kids. It's just a matter of time before somebody gets hurt.
Anger Road's the same way, so is
It's
Clinton.
everywhere. It's everywhere in the township. It's just not yours.
I understand that.
It's everywhere. It's even on the back roads where there's no houses.
But the question is, going forward, do you want to require
You say
secondary
something, sir.
access points?
Definitely.
Well, you can't.
do
You
something to that.
You know,
can't.
but
So
they-
we
they
actually
could put
looked.
speed bumps in if they make them big enough, just like they did over there in Peters
Can't.
Township.
We went through this round and
Yeah,
round and
because
round.
it's the small ones, but you put the,
No,
Okay.
because there's certain requirements for speed bumps, like you have to do state analysis, Dan, and I'm doing a terrible job of explaining this.
You're exactly right.
Of like where they go. You can't just like go and layer speed bumps through, and then you have like in certain neighborhoods or certain municipalities, you have people complaining who live by those speed bumps because every time a car goes over the speed bump and it's outside their house, and that's what they hear. Like, I get it. I get the idea for emergency access, but I think you can't just demand it across the board for every neighborhood. It needs to be considered. If you're putting it where the secondary access go onto roads where you're not gonna have as many cut-throughs, then fine, do it. But if you're connecting like to a major state road like 980, I really think it creates way more of a safety hazard than it actually helps. So I just think, I'm not saying I'm opposed to secondary access, but you need to make, you can't just say it has to be across the board. Make sense?
Bill, the problem with speed bumps is, it's when they go over them, these young kids, then they take off, squealing their tires and everything.
Like, we did an analysis in my neighborhood, and there was, one spot?
Plus
in
the
the
snow
there
plows.
In the entire neighborhood, this was before I was even on the board, or at the very beginning I was on the board. In my entire neighborhood, there was one place that a speed bump could go with state requirements.
PennDOT requirements.
To meet PennDOT requirements, yeah. So it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
So that's what we do, but that's exactly my point. Yeah, like, but when you're looking at a PRD or a plan, you can make that determination and say, okay, I think this plan, you could have 2 exits. If you have a lot of roads like pristine fields, it's not a straight throughway, so you can have 2 exits because nobody's gonna go from O'Hare all the way through pristine fields to come out the other side.
980.
right, onto 980. You're not gonna do that. But in Timber Run, where I live, so in that instance, it makes sense to have two entrances, two exits in Pristine Fields. But in Timber Run, my neighborhood's basically one straight, street, so that's where people fly. In McConnell's Trails, it's the same way. They have two roads, but it's basically one straight throughway, so people fly. So you need to be able, as a board, we need to be able to look at the plan when the developer comes before us and say, yes, it makes sense to demand a locked gate, or no, we want it open all the time. But if you set these things into ordinances, then it's set that way, and there's no wiggle room for the board to make determinations.
The other thing,
Rising Road, Miranda is gonna supply their emergency exit, all the police will have a key, and all the firemen. It will be, like you said, a locked gate.
Yeah.
I just know up where I am, up in Windsor, it's tough because something happens up there, even whenever they were doing paving down on and stuff, it was still tough to get in there.
But that's like a temporary thing. You know what I mean? Yeah, we all face those, but if you couldn't tell, with an unbearable passion, hate the second exit to my neighborhood. It's made my front yard unusable I can't let my kids out there, I can't let my dogs out there, because if one of them rolls a ball and goes after it, or the dog goes into the yard, or out of the yard into the street, they're gone. Like, people fly through the neighborhood.
And I think Dan cured
That's
some of
everywhere.
that by making the entry road going in 3 lanes wide.
yeah, I think there's multiple alternatives. Yeah, you can widen the road as you come in, you can create an emergency connection. We have a couple emergency connections. We actually have one in Pristine Fields that connects 2 cul-de-sacs. There's one over in the other plan, Ironwood. There's an emergency connection between the 2 cul-de-sacs in Ironwood. So there's other places where you can do things. I agree, it shouldn't just be one thing, but I think it might be good to just put something in the PRD ordinance just to say that emergency access should be considered. These are the things that should be, you could give a variety of things that could
I'm
be considered.
okay with wording it like that, where we're saying emergency access should be, a secondary emergency access should be
Yes.
considered. But I don't want to demand a full second.
Well, even that should be considered, doesn't obligate an emergency access.
We just want people to consider it, and you can say, hey, that could be a condition that we require.
Right.
Did we have to do that, though, to meet the fire code?
I'm sorry, what about
They adopt the fire code that we had to have?
that's been
We
rescinded?
Yeah,
rescinded
they
it,
took
we
it back.
repealed that.
And that's not sitting well, because
2015.
they took it back.
International.
There was too much in there. Anything else?
Yeah, one more question about that. But what could end up blocking like an entrance to a plan, like say to the plan for like Windsor Woods? A bomb dropping right at the road entrance? I mean, what would block a plan where people can't get out, Dan? I mean, what have you?
I mean, I did a big plan in Moon Township years ago. They thought about an airplane crashing in, but they still let them put 200 lots off of one road. Coming in, we did a plan right up on the Moon. Like I said, they weren't,
Construction,
yeah,
sometimes they don't care, they just park across there because they figure there's no entrance.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, but
they-
that's a short, we could,
Temporary thing, I agree,
Right.
it's not something that's gonna be.
It's an inconvenience, though, yeah.
you're right.
In other
Right,
words,
but
you
it
go
to
another
me,
way.
that doesn't warrant,
And they would move it.
right,
Hey,
they
you're
would move
blocking
it.
the
Like,
road.
you'd call the police and they'd move it. That
I
doesn't
don't
warrant,
agree.
like, a whole second entrance. I think Tom's point was, like, what
Right
would
there in
make
Windsor Woods, that
one
one
entrance or one
cul-de-sac, I
exit
could hardly turn
totally,
my
completely
SUV
unusable
around in there.
to residents? And, I mean, if those things happen, the reality is, like, most of us aren't gonna be in there anyway, so.
All right, the other thing is, we have to address off-street parking. I mean,
Not it.
Obviously, it's a fight all the time.
Not it, I'm not talking about that, no. I don't, what do you
know how
do?
I feel.
How do you address it?
Even at McConnell's, there's not enough. That lot's filled every
well,
night.
no, we could just add a section to the PRD ordinance that requires off-street parking. Wait, what question is how many off-street spaces do you want per unit of development? I mean, we could look at some of the other plans that recently were approved. I mean, I think Lynn Foltz's plan has too much parking.
Yep, the one street coming all the way down on the
Yeah, they don't-
east side,
don't
or
use it.
west side, there must be another 30 spots along there. and that's all.
There's too much there, and then you would probably say in other places there aren't. Well, what's our other one over by Teodori? That's the one that has nothing.
Georgetown.
Georgetown has nothing at all.
But Georgetown's like a weird layout because the driveways are so close to each other.
Right.
So there's no place to park on the side of the road, whereas
And
like,
they're all multifamilies too, every one of them, where
right,
we have PRDs that are single-family.
right.
um,
So I think, can you write something
We
in
can
there
write
that's
something up to
dependent,
just
on-
But do
address
we
it.
want to? That's the point.
but
The-
dependent on the plan? Because if there's enough space, like if we end up with a development that has acre lots or something, you don't need parking because there's plenty of
There's not
parking
going to
in
be
front
acre
of the
lots
street.
on PRDs.
I'm just saying, like, I just use that as an
We're talking about just a
example.
PRD ordinance right now, that's all we're talking about, that I wrote on there, off-street parking areas for PRDs. The other thing is, we got this PRDs, a few parking spots on that, the new plan off of Ricing.
Silver Creek.
Yeah, but
There
who's
ain't
gonna
hardly
be,
enough.
there's gonna be 3 up here, I'd have to walk a mile up a hill to park my car up there. So, that was a joke there.
And there's townhouses.
But again, I'll take the argument that you guys, you came at this from a good direction. You want parking when you have multifamily townhouses.
Yes.
Because that's really when you need, that's your densest. But when people have single-family homes with double-car garages and parking spaces in the driveway, do you really need additional off-street parking? That's really the question. Silver Creek put them in, but it's all single-family.
Can't you do something like, for every 4 townhouses, you have 2 spaces?
You can,
But, yeah, it's
again,
Up there at McCall, there's so many townhouses, my God,
but they put in parking.
a little bit.
No, I think that's probably a little bit too much, but depending upon, let me come up with, see if there's something out there on that one. I don't think that'll be hard to find something for additional parking.
Well, and we have enough PRDs, we should have some history to learn something ourselves.
Well, have we gotten any complaints on parking at McConnell Trails?
No.
I haven't heard any.
If you talk to police, because I actually had this conversation with them, the issues aren't in neighborhoods like McConnell's Trails or Timber Run or Windsor Woods. The issues are in townhome communities like Georgetown,
Sherry Brook.
Cherrybrook, where there's less space between driveways for cars to park. Because if, we'll just say I'm having a party or Bill's having a party, people are parking outside of our houses, there's enough space not to block the neighbors' driveways. It's not those, it's townhome communities where they get the complaints.
All right, we can look at that. And then I brought on shared parking. I remember we had an issue somewhere about shared parking. I don't know if it was timing or weekends or something like that. And it wasn't clear in the ordinance. Can anybody recall?
Say that again, sorry.
We're going to allow
Shared parking is a concept, if you have a use, like during the day, it has one use that's going to get parking, but those people go home, and then at nighttime, a new group of people come in. So you don't want to double your parking for the.
Yeah, have a sea of asphalt there.
So typically, for shared parking, what we've been doing now is requiring there to be a study that's submitted that justifies the shared parking. You can do that. A lot of ordinances have that provision, and if they can tell you the times and the uses of the occupancy versus of the spaces, I'm just trying to think of an
But we
example.
also wrote in there that if the use changes, they have to, who's looking to put less parking in because they can share with their neighbor, they have to have the least available space to put their office building size requirements at 1 parking space for every 300 square foot. They have to have enough to be able to go there in case this business completely changes, and they're there all the time occupying. So then all of a sudden you have a problem if both of them were sharing and now they can't share, like a use changes.
I was just gonna say that though, like, what if you're allowing shared parking in an office building? Offices, people switch all the time.
Well, that's what I said, if this place that's sharing, they have to have enough ground on their lot. We're not gonna make them pave it, so everything's paved, both lots are fully paved, so they can put less paving in now, but if the use needs arises, they
You
do
can
have
expand
space.
it, okay,
Right, on their own property. So
I got you.
I know that's in there.
okay. Can we now
Wait,
move?
one more thing, we had an issue that came up, and I
You've
just can't
said
remember
one
what it
more
was.
thing like 5 times, I'm just
All right.
saying. I'm not calling you out, but I'm calling you out.
All right, the mixed use, is everybody?
Where are you? Like, you went, are you
Page
off?
3.
Huh?
Page 3 of
I
this.
think we only have page 1, didn't we?
It got stapled. I didn't see it. My bad, my fault. I didn't realize this was after. Go ahead.
Our mixed-use district, we still have to pin that down. Have you asked to look at it to see how the different uses that will be allowed in a mixed-use commercial?
But do you have
They're gonna buy-
examples of what you were thinking?
Well, yeah, I mean, that thing didn't change.
Well, it did, because some of it's labeled mixed-use commercial and some of it's labeled mixed-use residential.
Well, I mean, I just draft section 916 mixed-use district. I don't
Good,
have,
thanks, Jack.
Right? Am I wrong?
this one here that was passed.
No, see, this is what I'm talking
Well, no, I'm
about.
not talking about the map yet. I'm just talking about.
I
the
know, but
district.
when you're saying mixed-use district, when you're actually looking at the map and the definition of mixed use, there's two different ones, residential and commercial.
Right,
When you're
that's-
talking about a mixed-use district, are you gonna provide definitions for both of them?
That's what this was, it was a draft.
Oh, okay,
And then, sorry, everybody got that last time, but it was looking at these.
Here it is, right here.
gotcha.
Jack, we didn't have copies of that?
You're talking about this?
Yes, that's it.
Yeah.
I was gonna make some, I was gonna,
Do you have your copy there? I have it right here.
You have it? Here. Here's mine.
Yeah, just to take it home, so they can. All right, then we can go on then. This last thing I had was, last meeting, we talked about that proposed zoning map that we had here, the new zoning map. I looked at that again, and I think I mentioned this to Cindy. I looked at that, all the zoning the property around the Cherry Brook. There's a plant there, it's only at half capacity. So they have a lot of room for some development into that plant, but all the property around that abuts Cherry Brook area and the new highway ramps for the toll road in 79, it's all their access is through residential property, so we don't allow commercial development through residential property anyhow, so that's out of the question. There's a lot of property that's showing red on there, I think, and that's worthless.
So we have
That's
to
gonna
change
be
that. But Dan,
residential
there was
common
also there was also a change that you said needed to be made. Yes,
Yeah, there's a,
this is for,
That's McGann's Road going up South Fayette.
I'm up on 79, all this.
Right. Yep,
It's
all
just,
that.
there's a change that needs to be made up off of Rising Road. If you recall, we talked about the historic structure on this piece of property. When the map was made up, it was built like, this is not a part of Silver Creek. This little square and this, and I would assume that the board would want this to be mixed-use residential, similar to the way it got broken up on this side. Looked around the property line.
Dan, now is that where Burns and Skello bought both sides up there of the hill?
I'm not sure.
You know where the paintball place is?
No.
it's off of Rising where the new the new toll road comes
Burns and
down.
Skello bought all the land on both sides of the ramps,
Okay,
getting off and getting on.
All the way down to Rising?
Yeah.
so on a bigger map.
well, it looks like all that property was proposed to be mixed-use commercial. You see that, Ron?
What?
All that property, just push it back up to Dan. It's this area right here.
Mixed-use commercial.
Yeah, that,
That's all proposed to be mixed-use commercial. Green is commercial, the red is residential.
But we have to define that.
Well, it is, on that, Jack's getting that.
It isn't approved defined.
No, it's, you gotta review it. and-
Right,
It's just a draft
right.
of what it could look like.
so this property in here, the question is, should this be This isn't property part of Silver Creek. This boundary right here along this line and this little corner, the question is, what does the board want that to be? If you extended the green lines over, then it's mixed-use commercial. We made the red residential because it was around the historic structure here. So it's
That's
either
what
green or
Burns's
red in
College is what?
my
I
view.
think I have that.
They got big signs up there,
Suggestion.
development
Thank you.
tabs.
If it abutted a state road, it was normally mixed-use commercial. If it was on a state road, or had access to the state road. Anything that was accessed from a local road was all mixed-use residential.
Dan, what are you saying it should be?
Yeah, that's fine. It's either the red or the green. If you extended this green arrow, the green lines down into here, it would make, this parcel all, like on this side of Rising,
commercial.
would all be mixed-use commercial. And
But
then
there's a
you
page
have
missing.
Silver Creek above it. This is all land that can't be developed anyway next to Silver Creek.
But like realistically, is
You didn't do the
anybody
back of
gonna
that.
develop that into
It's on the
commercial?
back?
No.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it maximizes its potential. I mean, you
Yeah.
can still do residential within that zone though, too.
But like realistically, I don't think that's gonna get developed into anything, do you?
It's still close to the highway. God's not making any more land close to the highway
That's
That's
true.
right.
That
God's
is
not
true.
making any more land, period.
at all, especially next to the highway.
That's for sure.
Make the new ones, this is.
Makes fingers every night.
Back page. Look right back.
Does the board want to make that change, to make that mixed use commercial then?
Sure.
Yes.
Okay, so Dan, will you update that then? Thank you.
Now, you done with that?
Yeah,
All right, I just want to say, right now, our goal has to be to get some more commercial tax base. They're be ready for it. There's only 3 viable areas that have water and sewers today where someone could build something tomorrow and for our commercial tax base. And that's that ABB property, expanding South Point, and that property above Racing Road, above the treatment plant. That either that commercial or that mixed-use commercial, or regular commercial. So, I mean, those things, somebody could build on it tomorrow if the property's sold. That doesn't mean anybody's gonna come out tomorrow. Could be years and years. But for businesses will go into a community and say, here's what I have, where can I put my business? If you say, I don't have anything, then they're gonna go to North Strabane or South Strabane. We don't owe that kind of attention to residential developers, because they're gonna come in, look around, they don't need us, they're not even gonna come and look at us, talk to us, they're gonna go find a piece of property they want.
So where are you saying you wanna add commercial?
he's saying the 3 areas would be, one would be like in the area around Muse. Here's, my cursor's on Muse right here.
That ABB property
Yeah, so the ABB property is right here.
has water
Everything-
and sewer on it today.
Yeah, this all flows down and into the brush run sewer system, so this gets sewer.
But can it be developed per like the regulation of the cleanup?
Sure, that's the purpose of that cleanup. It's gonna be, the proposal is industrial.
But when we were looking at,
Someone else gonna clean it up and
I
develop
know
it.
that, but when we were cleaning it up, there were requirements, things you couldn't do, parcels, like areas that you couldn't do anything on. Before we go ahead and I'm not opposed to it, but before we label it commercial, we should talk to John Allen and make sure that it actually can be used for commercial.
It's industrial.
He wants industrial, definitely. He definitely wants industrial.
The proposal was industrial. See, it's shown that.
Yeah, but you had some SD on the end of it. You didn't want that.
So he wants industrial and you wanna make it commercial?
From there to Burnside, he wants industrial.
When I say commercial development, I mean, that's commercial and industrial, well, depending on the zone. It's commercial as opposed to residential. So if I don't say industrial, it's just because
But
it's.
that's what it's already proposed to be zoned on here, so I don't understand.
That's what I'm saying, but we have to set a hearing, we have to get these little amendments ready to go. We can get one package of some of these amendments, definitions ready to go, these couple pieces of areas that we can zone now, have our hearing, change the zoning.
Let's
Then
do
we can
it.
keep looking at all the rest of those, through the months and years
So
ahead.
here's what you need to do. You need to have Jack send an email to the board earlier than 11 o'clock on the day of the meeting and send it to us and say, these are the things that are going to be changed. Speak now or forever hold your peace about changes. Give us a month to work on it, to read it and talk to people.
That's what this work session is for, Cindy.
for.
Wait,
We've
wait,
been
wait,
Darlene,
wait.
stop talking over him. You've been echoing him
No,
all night.
you've been talking over him. Let
No,
him
nobody's been talking.
explain it.
Listen, it's a work session. I'm just saying there's three prime areas that we think we should change whenever it happens. I'm not saying tomorrow or next month. I'm just saying those are the three that we've got to work on first. We can't hold these back till we do the whole township wide and decide what we're going to change out on West End or we're going to change on 980 down here. We've got to get something done that's viable.
You know that I agree with you. My point is, Tom, that we keep kind of like pushing this off, and then all of a sudden it's the day of the meeting, and it's like, oh shoot, we're gonna send stuff out. If you know that like this is the definition, then this needs to go to the board
That's
a
what we're
little
here
bit
for.
before, so we all have it now. Now it is the responsibility of the board and Jack to make sure that we have it, we make whatever changes we want, we schedule a hearing where everybody can be here and we're not scrambling to be here, and we make those changes. But like literally, the packet was sent at 11 o'clock today. And that's not on Jack. I'm not blaming
It
Jack
wasn't a
for that.
packet.
It was this. It was the information that you
Yeah, it's
sent.
just an outline of things to talk about at this work session.
Right,
And
but
I'm just saying that for zoning changes on this whole map, there's three areas that we got to consider. And we could do it right away. The rest of it can wait.
But Frank, for example, and me, for example, because I had meetings all day, like he was working all day. So he didn't have a chance to look at your outline and neither did I. If I would have
I
had
know,
a
that's
chance.
why we're here.
But once we're already here, like I need a minute to look at it, to research it,
have
to
all
talk
month.
to John Allen.
Just next 2 months.
This is, I think what Tom's asking for, maybe I can, is what we could do is between Jack and I, we put together a little map of the changed areas
Yep.
to be changed, to get it back to the board, to review it one more time to see if people are in agreement. At the same time, this needs reviewed, obviously, because Tom, you're saying here, this would be, what's the thought on this? I-1, I-2, I-1, right?
He's asking for I-1, but we have to make some kind of adjustment for the school on that tail of that property, and I think we talked about that, making an adjustment. See that tail?
Yeah.
that
We
goes
already
towards the
talked
school?
about that.
That line could be across there and make that just commercial or something less than industrial that abuts the school.
Right.
So I'm just saying, those are the areas we gotta concentrate. I'm not saying we do anything now or this coming meeting or anything like
But
that.
this is, Tom, like, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with everything you're saying, but the problem is, we sit down here tonight, we talk about it, and then you don't hear, like, anything for 2 months until all of a sudden we're like, oh, we have to schedule a meeting, and then 11 o'clock the day. We know what we have to do. So now it's in the lap, sorry, Jack, of Jack and Dan and you who are pushing these things to make an organized packet or an organized piece of information that we can all look at and say, yep, we agree and we're comfortable voting. And then we schedule it in June as soon as we can and we move forward with it. We didn't even, like, no offense, but we didn't even really need to be here tonight because a lot of the stuff we walked through, we've all talked about 5 times.
You finally got nobody said they saw this or had it.
I did.
You sent this to
for 2
me
months.
unless it's
Yes.
changed.
That
I
was in
have
our
it.
other packet.
So is there consensus to at least come up with a proposal around use, right? Everybody's in agreement, something show it to the board and make sure that you have something to look at and say, this zone's gonna be industrial, I-1, and then there'll be a strip of commercial, and then maybe this is nothing, right? It stays the way it is. So we'll come up with something. So what's the other area that's, Tom, you're saying up here?
That expansion of SD past Ironwood along Klinger.
Okay,
I know it's the Barney property and the Lewandowski property.
okay. And
It's
then,
2 big parcels that abut South Point.
and then the third area is this whole,
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
anything we can do above the treatment plant on Ricing on the state road.
Those have to be separate votes. Like, there have to
Yeah,
be
well, they will be.
separate
They will.
votes. Yeah, they have to be.
For these viable areas, you might as well take the ADB off there, you know what's going in there. I mean,
Not if we
why,
don't change
why,
it. Not if we don't change it.
huh?
it's BPD right now, Ron, you want it to be industrial.
Yeah, that's what he wants, but I mean, it's not a viable area as far as development.
Industrial
He's
it is.
looking for it.
Understood, but he'll still need zoning when he decides to
Yeah.
build something.
He needs us to change the zone.
The industrial. That's what he wants.
And we gotta be careful on, near
We
the
have
school
to
area.
be careful of the residents too, like, we have to make sure the residents in Muse are protected, and we have to make sure that they know that this change is happening.
Yeah, you're gonna have to have a public hearing and notify people and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
like, we at
Once the
we have to make a concerted effort to make sure the people in Muse
It'll be
know.
posted.
Yeah, like, know about this, because I don't want blowback, like, after we make that change, of everybody screaming and yelling that they didn't know that that property that close to residential was gonna be made industrial.
You know, it surprises me, we never told all them people in Muse it's contaminated around their houses.
They attended those meetings, they saw.
No, I'm talking about the meeting we had out of Gateway. Engineers had showed it all. Almost down to Muse Club.
So just kind of summarize, first things we talked about were changes to the UDO, which we went over. So we'll come back with a document that would substantiate all the changes to the UDO is number one. Number two is to come back with some changes to the zoning map proposed around the areas that Tom's talking about. And number three is to look over the mixed use, adoption of the mixed use section to the ordinance.
But we have to know, we have to agree too with the definition of mixed use, because that is, the mixed use residential and mixed use commercial are new. So that goes hand in hand with the adoption of the map.
That's a whole separate section to add.
Right,
Yeah.
and so people have to people being the board members, need to understand what they're voting on when they vote. You need to take the time to read the words before you vote on the map.
Right, that's what this is, that's all mixed use then. draft.
Yes.
Yeah, this would be a whole separate ordinance just to add this to the, I think this is different than the other stuff.
Right, that's,
Yeah, add this as a standalone section.
well, we can't change zoning, and this has to come before the zoning. We have to create the zone before we can say this property is zoned.
Yes.
Right.
So I'm saying it gives us a lot to work on.
There's a
Think
lot
about.
there.
But here's the thing, like, let's set a meeting now, for, like, while we're all here, none of this, like, emailing around stuff, because that got to be a disaster. Yeah, I couldn't be here, like, I had to, like, cancel a bunch of stuff to be here, I have a sick kid at home. So let's look at the calendar now, while we're all here, make sure that we can all be here, and not just this whole 3 people can go, let's schedule a meeting, baloney. So what if we schedule, to give us a month, what if we schedule, what is today's date? The 22nd. What if we schedule, you say nothing?
No, it's not the same.
Oh, you said, what if we schedule it for Monday, June 19th? Does that work? Dan, you're required.
Monday, June 19th, yeah, I'll be in town.
Do you, could we change it to 6 if they only have like 1 or 2 things before them? Yeah, we can make that change, okay. Thank you, Jeff.
And can Dan do at least highlight those 3
Yes.
areas we have?
Yes, that's
that
what
are
I want him to
possible?
do.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I have, I mean, there's sort of 3 different things going on. Updates to the UDO, changes to the zoning map, and the standalone mixed use. So those are kind of the 3 summaries. There's a lot in the UDO that put in there that we talked about tonight, so that's probably the hardest part.
Do you have this too?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, and all 3 of these.
Yep.
Meeting, it's actually not really even a meeting. I have to like, Jack needs my gavel. People are gonna be like, she needs power. Meeting.
First time you ever used it.
Follow Jack's orders. He said I have to gavel at the beginning and gavel at the end. That's how he knows how to start and stop the meeting. I just follow directions.
Dan,
I
did you
feel
see
silly
that
using it.
I put in here too, your definition of essential services. Steam plants,
Dan, you want these maps back?
Yes.
You can have them. There's nothing unusual there. You can have them.
What if I don't need
If you don't need it, I'll take them back, save them, bring them to the next meeting.
I brought mine from home.